Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the DFS Report. We are, in fact, live at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. What a surprise. The boys do it right sometimes. Just a three-game slate today, so a little bit easier. And man, a three-game slate feels like just an absolute easiest day of all time, following up a 14-game slate. So should be a nice, relaxed show. I got a podcast to do later this afternoon, so it won't be the longest three-game slate we've ever talked about, but we'll make sure we get in depth on all three of these matchups. And honestly, I really like the look of this slate. Three games is probably one game too small to be like a good slate, but for a three-game slate, I think it's a pretty nice looking slate. Pretty excited to break it down. Let's get into it. We'll start with the goalies. We don't know a whole lot. We got three games on back-to-backs here, or three teams on back-to-backs. So Igor Shesterkin starts for the New York Rangers, projecting to see Jonas Korpisalo in the second half of back-to-back for the Bruins. Jeremy Swayman had the shutout last night. It'll be Arvid Soderblom for the Chicago Blackhawks. He's been a bit of a chalk buster as of late. We'll see what he can do tonight against the Edmonton Oilers, who are projected to go with Calvin Pickard. Second half of back-to-back for them as well. Then it'll be Darcy Kemper for the LA Kings, expecting to see Jakub Dobish for the Montreal Canadiens. Again, second half of a back-to-back for the Habs. So those are your six confirmed or projected starting goalies for tonight's three-game slate. Let's start with the first game. The New York Rangers and the Boston Bruins. The New York Rangers 3.7 implied total, massive, minus 206 favorites. You see here, a lot of big favorites, a lot of big underdogs on tonight's slate, so it's going to be interesting to navigate. But we talked about it yesterday. Boston looked like they were in a pretty decent spot against the Wild. They ended up shutting them out 3-0. The Wild really can't get anything going without Kaprizov, it seems. But honestly, the Bruins are a little sneaky tonight, and we'll dive right into it here. The top line of the Boston Bruins, have the number one matchup score overall tonight. Also the highest event game of the night. So pretty interesting spot here for Boston. One, a line that we liked last night, a line that we've said has played extremely well as of late. The underlying metrics support that as well. Pretty strong across the board. Not amazing, but solid enough. They also play a ton. 32% of the ice time is tied for the most of any line at 5v5 this evening. And then on the power play, they look pretty decent as well. Sixth best power play as of late, going up against the 11th ranked PK. Overall, it's the second best power play advantage of the night. So everything really kind of coming up Boston one tonight. And they grade out as the number two line overall. And then when you sort by ownership, that is not the case whatsoever. They are, what would that be? The ninth highest owned line on the slate. So looks like a really nice leverage spot here for Boston. One, given how poor the Rangers kind of current line combos grade out defensively. They've looked a little bit better, right, since acquiring JT Miller. But they did just give up, what was it, 5-3 they lost the Bruins like a couple days ago. It was his first game with the Rangers. So this Bruins team certainly capable of getting to the Rangers tonight. So let's start with the Boston side of things here. Number one matchup score, looking like a really good leverage play for us tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Got a lot of interest in Boston one here. Projecting for about 10% ownership in terms of full stacks here tonight on this slate. I think for me, just looking at this slate as a whole, I think that's a spot that I'm going to be comfortably getting over the field on 20 max for me tonight. And I think, doubling the field up here on Boston one, I don't think is the worst way to go. There's some other nice spots on this slate here, but, the matchup score is a really nice marker there. David Pastrnak is just absolutely on fire right now. He is on like the heater of all heaters. So it looks like a good spot. And as you mentioned too, like Boston got to the Rangers a couple of days ago. In a spot that the Rangers looked like they were in a decent spot themselves. So, the defensive metrics are pretty poor here for the top six of the Rangers. And 64% of Boston one's ice time is going to be coming up against that JT Miller line. So they're going big on big here tonight. And it looks like Boston one's in a great spot to win that battle.
Yeah, we talked about, I mentioned that game. It was actually 6-3 for the Bruins that night. My apologies. And David Pastrnak had a hat trick and 1 assist, 4 points for him. Zaka had a goal and an assist. Geeky had 1 assist in that contest. So, yeah, that line looks like it's in a really good spot tonight. Marchand had 2 helpers that night as well. And it was also Igor Shesterkin that got the call, as he will this evening. I don't know, exactly how much stock I'm going to put into the 100% matchup score. Like the way these lines currently grade out and the way that this Rangers team is currently configured, I mean, they look terrible defensively. So, I'm buying in a little bit, but as a whole, they've definitely been much better defensively as of late. 2.66 expected goals against per 60 is not an amazing mark, though. So, I do still think Boston's gettable. It's not going to take much to kind of double the field up here. Like we said, they're about 10% owned. So, really interested in Boston one. I don't know if I'm really going to get to much else from the Bruins side of things tonight. The second line, the third line, they grade out pretty well. The matchups are pretty good. I just think that this top line is really the one that's doing a lot of the damage, and that's probably going to continue to be the case. As I mentioned, Boston 1 grades out second best overall, Boston 2 8th best, then Boston 3 12th best. So I think that'll probably be getting to depth pieces of some of these other teams on the slate tonight. Boston, I don't know if necessarily that's going to end up being the case, but if you do plan on playing Boston too, just 14,000 to full stack. They're coming in at 8.4% ownership. Then the third line with Poitras, Frederick, and Wallstrom, just 1.7% ownership and $9,900 for them. What are you planning to get to anything else here from the Bruins? I mean, let's pull up their power play units. Obviously, Marchand on that top power play unit, Lindholm as well. So, like, if you want to build around Boston too, they still, somewhat correlate on that top power play unit with Pastrnak. So they're in an okay spot, I guess. I wouldn't maybe completely rule out Boston too. I just don't feel like they've got the ceiling that Boston 1 does with how good Pastrnak's playing as of late. And we've talked about it a lot recently. Given how cheap Geeky and Zach are, it's really not that steep of a price tag to full stack Pastrnak's line, and he's still just $8,500, which seems way too cheap given how well he's played. And it's not like it's a 5-game hot streak. Like he's leading the NHL in points since Christmas. Like it's been well over a month of just stellar play from him. And you mentioned it yesterday. Zach and Geeky don't have the best floors ever, but they seem to be getting on the score sheet every single night, so it doesn't really matter. 18,200, really nice price tag. Probably gonna rule me out of most of the rest of the Boston lineup. But are you planning to get to any Boston too tonight?
I think I'm going to mix them in, because I am 20 maxing here tonight. They're seeing a little bit of ownership coming their way here as well on this slate as I just go back to that tab on my screen here. Coming in around 8% ownership, I think I'm comfortable meeting the field at like 10% on a full stack. But I almost wonder if most of that ownership is just going to kind of come with throwing Brad Marchand onto some Boston 1 stacks here. Pavel Zacha and Pasta obviously are on the top power play unit there, so you get a little correlation with Marchand. The thing about Boston too that's the real issue for me is that when you take a look at Elias Lindholm and Charlie Coyle, like there just hasn't been as much production there as of late over their last 20 games. Elias Lindholm, 0.7 goals per hour of ice time, 1.8 points per hour. Charlie Coyle, 0.9 goals per hour, 1.7 points per hour. So, fair production. It's not terrible numbers or anything like that, but certainly below a league average mark for the forward groups. And they really just don't shoot the puck at all. They average about 5.5 shots on goal per hour between the two of them. So it's a pretty bleak spot, it feels like, in terms of really being able to cap that upside. It feels like if Marchand is if there's going to be offense, it's coming through Marchand in some way, shape, or form there. So I think I'm okay with, not getting too crazy here on Boston too. Like I said, I'll get to 10% in my 20 max just to kind of say that I did. I do like the Bruins as a whole as underdogs here tonight in the betting market too. Like they look like pretty juicy underdogs in this spot going up against the Rangers. And this New York side of thing, like it's looking a little bit bleak right now. You take a look at the offensive metrics for these lines here, and it's not the greatest. I like the look of this top line. They've obviously had some production since JT Miller has showed up there. He looks like he's rejuvenated Mika Zibanejad, who's been on a bit of a heater these last couple of games. So I've got some interest in getting to New York 1 here as well. But, they're also seeing like 25% ownership. I think they're the highest owned line on this slate here. Yeah, they are. They're projecting for 24% ownership versus Edmonton 1's 18.8%. So, I think for me, like I've got interest in the Rangers. I just don't know if I love them at 25% on a 3-game slate.
Yeah, I mean, just to get back to Boston too before I move to New York here. Marchand, as you mentioned, is kind of the guy that does the majority of the damage. Last 10 games, 4 goals, 5 assists, 2.3 shots per game. So, decent floor. But Coyle just 1.3 shots per game. Lindholm just 1.7 shots per game. They've kind of been just around half a point per game during that stretch. So, just not a whole lot of floor. On a 3-game slate, I don't mind mixing them in a little bit, but yeah, certainly not going to be overweight on them in any huge capacity. New York 1, like it's these underlying metrics obviously don't stand out too much. We've seen that Panarin and Zibanejad have had issues together in the past, and that's what the majority of this sample is. Obviously, JT Miller has only been there for a couple of games so far, but the actual underlying metrics for them is much better than what you would see on the charts here. Again, just 25 minutes of a sample size, so super small, but 4.6 expected goals for per 60, 37.3 scoring chances for per 60, and 18.7 high danger chances for per 60. So again, super small sample, but so far, so good without question. The matchup for them, as you mentioned, is going to be a lot of that top line of the Boston Bruins, Zaka, Geeky, Pastrnak. They've basically been about average on tonight's slate defensively, so I do think that it's a spot in which New York can have some success. Looks like it could be a fairly high event matchup given because, as good as the offensive metrics are for Miller, Panarin, and Zibanejad, the defensive metrics are okay. 2.5 expected goals against, 21 scoring chances against, but still 18.7 high danger chances. Super small sample. In a larger body of work, I do think is a matchup Boston one can take advantage of, and I do think it can be a higher event matchup. And then you factor in the power play as well. Number one power play advantage on the night for the New York Rangers. 8th best power play over their last 10 games, going up against a Bruins PK that's really struggled. And then you've got this line fully correlating on that top power play unit. So even if maybe Boston one ends up winning this matchup a little bit at 5v5. The Rangers top power play unit looks like they're in just an unbelievable spot tonight. So this top line, most of my interest from the New York side of things, obviously coming in on this top line here, but it is worth mentioning that, yesterday we were talking about Minnesota 1 grading out extremely well because a lot of their matchup was going to be coming against Boston 2. New York 2 is going to see 35% of the ice time. I would like to see it a little bit higher. New York 2, the defense or the offensive metrics are really poor without Panarin. So a bit of a risky play, but they still play an absolute ton. Projected for 31% of the ice time tonight. So they're still getting a ton of run. Trocheck, Lafreniere, and Riley Smith. And this is a Boston second line that is just not very good defensively. So I think that New York 2 is somewhat sneaky. You talked about New York 1 garnering the most ownership on the slate at 24.4%. New York 2 coming in about half that ownership. Super cheap as well. 15,100 if you want to full stack them. I probably prefer maybe a little bit of a Trocheck Lafreniere mini stack. If you want to save a little bit of salary, you can go with a Riley Smith Trocheck mini stack with Smith being $1,000 cheaper than Lafreniere. So I really do like getting to New York 2 tonight. The metrics don't support it, wholeheartedly, but the matchup looks really solid if they see a little bit more ice time against Boston 2. But yeah, New York 2 or New York 1, excuse me. I think I feel pretty comfortable meeting the field there at about 25%. I don't know if I'll get over the field. I'll probably be more likely to come under, but second half of a back-to-back for the Bruins, really nice power play matchup. I think that the New York 1 hot start could certainly continue, and I want to take advantage of this line while they're cheap, right? I mean, Zibanejad struggled all season long, so his price tag at $5,900 is way too cheap for how he's played as of late. JT Miller, same story, and then Panarin just $7,300 is obviously $1,200 cheaper than where it is kind of like at its height. So I really feel comfortable taking advantage of their price tag while it's as low as it is, because it's probably another game, maybe two, before these guys are probably $22,000.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've got, some interest here in getting to the Rangers for sure. I don't think the top line's in a terrible spot by any means. Obviously, again, coming in hot here these last couple of games. The interesting thing about New York too, as well, is when you look at the individual ownership, most of it's coming in on Vincent Trocheck and Riley Smith, right? So if you look at it that way, you got Alexis Lafreniere at 7% ownership. That's drawing half of what the other two are. So by going the route of a Trocheck Lafreniere mini stack, you're automatically getting yourself a little bit different from the field there tonight. So I don't mind going that route at all. And Lafreniere is the guy who's got the highest shot volume of the three of them. So a little bit of a better floor there. Taking 8.7 shots on goal per hour of ice time.
Just to further the New York conversation here, Jonas Korpisalo's last 6 games, 2-2-1 with an .875 save percentage. So he's struggled as of late as well. Lines up nicely for New York. Any interest in New York 3 tonight? Maybe just a Chris Kreider mini stack, maybe a Chris Kreider Will Cooley mini stack. I mean, Brodzinski's got decent shot volume at times. He's drawing 11% ownership. It looks like the field is having a no issue getting to New York 3 here in a value spot. Again, they're another line that's going to have a solid matchup tonight. They're going to see a lot of that Boston second line. The underlying metrics don't really support it, but there is enough offense here. Kreider's still on that top power play unit. Are you planning on mixing them in at all before we move to game number 2?
Probably not very much. I mean, I think I maybe have a little bit of interest in like a Kreider Cooley mini stack or getting Kreider in for some power play one correlation. But I don't really know if I'm going to be getting there a whole lot on this third line. The offensive metrics aren't the greatest. Brzezinski's on like a bit of a shooting heater here in the Rangers' last 20 games. He's played just 78 minutes, 1.5 goals per hour over that time, but not a lot of shot volume from him whatsoever. I wouldn't be banking on him to continue driving offense in a big way or anything like that. But yeah, like I said, I think I've got some interest in a Kreider Cooley mini or maybe some Kreider one-offs or power play correlation.
Yeah, Chris Kreider, where are you? Has he been that bad that he's just not even on this list? Yeah, he's 3 points in his last 10 games, just 1.8 shots on goal per game. Cooley, 3 points in his last 10 games, just 1.9 shots per game. I feel more comfortable getting over the field on New York 2 than I do trying to pay up for this or take on some of this ownership that New York 3 is garnering, in my opinion. Game number 2, the Chicago Blackhawks and the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers are minus 279 home or road favorites, 4.0 implied total is the highest on the slate. We've seen, some really, really big spots here. It feels like almost every one of these small slates as of late has the Chicago Blackhawks hosting just an offensive powerhouse. And it's like, how does this go wrong? And somehow it seems to go wrong. We've seen what was it? I think Florida floundered the one time, then Tampa did. Is this setting up for Edmonton to fail tonight? I'm not so sure, just given how well this team is playing right now. These two met twice already this season. The Blackhawks did win the first meeting, but that was the second game of the season. They won 5-2, just an absolute stunning performance. Leon Draisaitl and Corey Perry scored goals that night. And then in their second meeting, the Oilers won 4-3. Leon Draisaitl had 2 assists. Connor McDavid was held off the score sheet, which is 1 shot on goal. So could we see something like that? We'll ask our Oilers Stan Zach here in a moment. But before we do that, let's get into the matchups here, get into the weeds a little bit. Gonna have that Jason Dickinson line going head-to-head with the McDavid-Leon Draisaitl duo for 80% of his ice time. That's roughly 68% of the ice time for Edmonton 1. Then you're gonna see the Bedard line facing off against the middle six of the Oilers. Which, not great matchups on the Chicago side of things whatsoever tonight. Second and third line drawing decent matchups here for the Oilers, but obviously the top line fully loaded up. The underlying metrics are absurd. So yeah, like this Dickinson line we know has been very, very good defensively in the past. They haven't been quite as good this year, but still hats off to them. They go up against the opposition's best more often than not. Still possessing, at least average defensive metrics is a testament to how good they are. They don't do a whole lot offensively. They really just kind of try to suck the life out of you. But I don't know if you can really do that against Edmonton 1. They always seem to get the job done in one way or another. They're just, basically matchup proof. I'm not too concerned about them here on a second half of a back-to-back, and I think this sets up really nicely. Them projected for just 18.8% ownership. Now, obviously, that's weighed down a little bit by Corey Perry at 13.2, but even Leon at just 17%. It is pretty low, and I like getting over the field here on Edmonton, right? Like we've seen games like this. It was a 3 or 4 game slate, maybe a week or two ago. Tampa 1 was like 40% owned in this exact same matchup. So, maybe the field has learned a little bit with how hard Tampa flopped that night. But I have no issue getting north of the field on Edmonton 1 tonight, and I'm almost certain you don't either.
Yeah, no, I have no issue here getting up well over the field on Edmonton 1. I mean, I'm probably going to be, double the field on them, probably up around that 30, 35, 40% range. It looks like a great spot for them, just like it's looked for a great spot for Tampa 1 and for Florida and for all these other great offensive teams. The one caveat that I will say here is in the 2 previous matchups between Edmonton and Chicago, the Oilers have played abysmal first periods, just horrendous first periods. That first game of the year, they lost 5-2, second game of the season. The Oilers got their asses whooped by Winnipeg a couple of nights before. They were not in it early on this season. They really struggled, outscored 1-0 in the first period in that game. Philip Kurashev got on the board 15 minutes into the period. And then the second game, on January 11th, it was a very similar situation where Teuvo Teravainen and Nick Foligno goals for Chicago in the first. Edmonton did not have a strong first period. Meanwhile, they're coming, like the Oilers right now are coming off of maybe one of their best first periods all season last night against St. Louis. Didn't get on the scoreboard, but absolutely walloped them in terms of possession and expected goals. They always had 2 expected goals in the first period at 5-on-5 alone against St. Louis. They were absolutely flying to start the game last night. And I think that's what we're going to see here again tonight. Like, I think the messaging for the Oilers is really going to be, okay, we have to come out strong tonight. We have to make Chicago pay early on in this game, build up a lead, and you can kind of coast from there. Well, you got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl together on the top line. That's a great way to do that, right? In the 2 previous matchups, that January 11th game, the Oilers' top line was Connor McDavid, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Connor Brown. And the first game of the season, or first game between these 2 teams, it was Nugent-Hopkins and Hyman up there. And of course, Hyman, we all know, slow start to the season, got left off of Team Canada at the 4 Nations. He's been much better since then. So have the Edmonton Oilers as a whole. So I really do think that this is a bit different here for the Edmonton Oilers in this spot tonight. And I got a lot of love for that top line. Corey Perry finding ways to be productive up there on that top line as well, which is great to see. Big jump in price for him, coming up to $3,500. So, makes them a little bit more expensive to full stack, $21,400 here. But I have no issue loading up on them tonight. I think there's enough value options on this slate in terms of some one-off plays that you can play to bring total salary down for a lineup. I've got some interest in these other lines for the Edmonton Oilers as well, mainly that second line. I talked about them yesterday. Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Victor Arvidsson. The underlying metrics haven't been great, or aren't great, I should say, for these 3 guys when they're together. Nugent-Hopkins still on an offensive heater, scoring 1.5 goals per hour over his last 20. Zach Hyman continuing to be snake bitten. 2 expected goals per hour over his last 20 games, 0.9 goals scored. So he's still due to have some more offense come his way. Oilers power play looks like it's in a fairly solid spot here. Chicago's penalty kill 21st over the last 10 games here. Color me surprised. I like the Edmonton Oilers tonight.
Yeah, great breakdown. Zach Hyman, last 10 games, leads the NHL in individual expected goals, shocker, in all situations by a considerable margin. 1.3 expected goals ahead of number 2, who's Tomas Hertl. Surprise, surprise, Leon Draisaitl is number 3 on that list. Just been unbelievable. And just to give you one more name that plays tonight, David Pastrnak, 6th on that list. So those 3 guys obviously looking like they're in good spots tonight. Okay, believe it or not, the Oilers' top line underlying metrics are actually better than what you see on the sheet here today. It's only a 50-minute sample, though, so it's hard to put too much stock into it. But the actual expected goals for number is 5.3, which is a giant jump. The actual scoring chance for numbers are 44.4, and the high danger chance is 14.4, so a little bit lower. But yeah, they're actually not converting, which is crazy, right? Like they've actually only converted at like 1.2 goals for per 60 so far. So they're a little bit due. I mean, I'm sure those expected goals for numbers are a little bit inflated. I think Corey Perry had like 3 whacks at a puck inside the crease in one shift yesterday. I'm sure that was worth a lot of expected goals. Didn't convert. But just to go back to Corey Perry for a second, does see a little bit of a price hike tonight to $3,500. But when you look at the value forwards tonight, there's not a lot to speak of. Alex Laferriere at $3,600 is the highest owned player on the slate. I think that really shows how little quality value there is at the forward position. So Corey Perry's looked pretty good. What has he got? 7 shots in 2 games while on that top line. So him being $3,500 and half the ownership of Laferriere, I think that he's a great play tonight, really, because there's just not a whole lot of value to speak of. It's obviously a great matchup. So I like Perry a lot tonight at $3,500, and he's looked solid. He's fit in pretty nicely on that top line. I don't know how much of the rest of this Oilers lineup I'm going to get to. Maybe I'll probably ride with you a little bit here with the Nugent-Hopkins Hyman mini stack. Maybe throw Arvidsson in the mix as well. But Hyman at just 7% ownership. I just mentioned how ridiculous the underlying metrics are for him lately. 7.9 individual expected goals, just 4 goals. So he's 3.9 goals scored below expected during his last 10 games alone is just insane. So the ownership is really affordable at 7%. The Nugent-Hopkins, as you mentioned, 5,600. The underlying metrics aren't great, but this is a matchup they can still take advantage of even without having the best underlying metrics. Obviously, the power play in a really good spot. The 4th best power play. Going up against the 21st ranked PK, the real issue here for the Oilers is just not expected to get nearly as many power play opportunities as Boston and New York, but really probably the best power play advantage of the night. Do you have any interest in the Chicago side of things? Obviously, Calvin Pickard's played very well. He's won 9 of his last 10 games, doesn't face a ton of volume, usually, stops 90% of the shots, gives up maybe 2 goals, but wins every single time, it seems. The one interesting note here about Chicago, one specifically, is Landon Slaggert moves up to the top line with Bedard and Ryan Donato. And now you've got Connor Bedard down to $5,900. And to full stack this line is $12,500. It is incredibly cheap. And, the matchup for them, a little bit of a mix of the Nugent Hopkins line, also the third line of the Oilers, which we don't know. Do we know for sure yet if Henrique's back? I'm assuming it's too early. They'll probably make an announcement once they get to the rink. But those two lines grade out pretty well defensively, so certainly not the best matchups. But the underlying metrics here for Chicago, one with Slaggert, Donato, and Bedard are fine, and I don't mind getting to them tonight. Oilers in the second half of back-to-back. We've seen the Blackhawks be capable of scoring goals against the Oilers so far this season. Picard's susceptible to giving up 1 or 2, and I do think if they score tonight, it's probably coming from this top line, and they're just outrageously cheap. They are garnering a healthy amount of ownership, specifically Donato and Bedard. Donato 18.8%, kind of in that same mix with Perry and Laferriere as just one of the kind of rare decent value options on tonight's slate. So Chicago 1 coming in with, what would that be, the 6th highest ownership overall. So yeah, I'm interested. I don't know if I'm going to be over the field or under the field, really, to be honest with you. But I think they're an interesting value play tonight, and I don't mind getting to them. If it came down to it, and I had to play some of the underdogs tonight, I think Chicago 1 is towards the top. I think they're in a better spot than Montreal is tonight. So I don't mind getting to Chicago 1. How about you?
Yeah, I don't mind getting to Chicago 1 at all here. Before I get into Chicago 1, 2 quick things that I just wanted to touch on. Corey Perry, going back to him, he's played 2 games with the Edmonton Oilers since he left the Chicago Blackhawks, both games this season. A goal and 3 shots on goal in each game, both goals coming at even strength. So just another reason to like Corey Perry in this spot tonight. You mentioned Calvin Pickard. Want to give him a quick shout too. Among all of the goaltenders in the NHL this season with over 10 games played, he has the 4th highest win percentage, winning 68% of his starts. That's tied with Jake Ottinger and trailing only Connor Hellebuck and Logan Thompson. So it's really good things are happening when Pickard's in the crease. It's been a solid season for him so far. I do have interest in Chicago 1 here. I think that the ownership number that we're seeing from Roto Grinders here is pretty fair. 13% ownership here on a 3-game slate. I think that's a fair number to get to. I'll probably come in at 10% in terms of a full stack, but I'm comfortable one-offing or mini stacking Bedard and Donato or Bedard and Slaggert here. It seems like a pretty interesting spot for them. Chicago, they've clearly had success against the Oilers this year. They've scored 8 goals in 2 games against the Edmonton Oilers. So that's not necessarily an easy thing to do because the Oilers have been really, really strong defensively so far this season. So I've got interest getting there. Bedard's price tag coming down to $5,900 just makes me like it a little bit more. I'd like to see more shot volume from him. He's not really shooting the puck a whole lot. Over his last 20 games, 6.3 shots on goal per hour of ice time. Granted, a shitload of minutes, 418 minutes over his last 20, averaging pretty much 21 minutes a game. But he is scoring 1.2 goals per hour over that time. It does seem like a pretty nice spot there for Chicago 1. I don't think I'll be getting to any of the other lines here for Chicago. It dries up very, very quickly. Obviously, you got that Dickinson line for that second line there. The third line, Tyler Bertuzzi sliding down with Frank Nazar and Nick Foligno. You could maybe talk me into 5% of them. I think they might be okay. Bertuzzi, he still had a strong stretch here over his last 20 games, 1.6 goals per hour. Granted, that is coming with Connor Bedard up on that top line largely. So I think you could talk me into a bit of Chicago here, but not a ton of interest in terms of going crazy on them tonight.
Let's get to the Chicago power play. They are the 4th best power play advantage of the night, but projected for the least power plays. But the power play has been solid for them. Oilers PK struggling a little bit over their last 10. Let's get to the final game of the night. You got the Kings and the Montreal Canadiens. You've got a minus 240 home favorites for the Kings, up 3.6 implied total for the Kings, 2.3 for the Habs. Kind of the same story here with the Kings. It's who ends up doing most of the damage tonight. Looks like the majority of that damage could come from the top two lines. Much better matchups than the Dano line, and the general public feels the same way. LA2 specifically drawing a ton of ownership. And actually, sorry, LA3 is projected for the highest ownership of the bunch. I'm assuming that's because they're the cheapest and the easiest to pair with the McDavid line. But you have no issues getting LA2 in there as well. A couple $100 more expensive. They're 14,400. Then a couple $100 more expensive than that is LA1. I prefer the two top lines that as opposed to the Dano line. Really not getting much of a floor at all from Phil Dano at 24% ownership. I understand him being kind of maybe the best cheap center on the slate, right? There's not a whole lot of quality under $3,000 or under $4,000, so that's kind of why people are getting there. Moore and Fogel definitely have solid floors. If I'm building around LA3, I'll include Dano, but I don't mind leaving him off either. Like I think Moore and Fogel have really nice floors that give you a decent amount at that $9,000 price tag between the two of them. So I don't mind them. Honestly, I much prefer these other two lines. The matchups are considerably better. You're going to see the Byfield line going up against that Suzuki line all night. We know that Suzuki line has really struggled defensively so far this season, but more than anything, that second line has just been getting absolutely murdered. Doc Newhook and Josh Anderson tonight. And that really makes LA1 interesting to me. Given the fact that they're projected for the lowest ownership of the bunch, definitely buying in here. Our Adrian Kempe, some of the best shot volume in the league at $6,500. Absolutely love him tonight. Kopitar, kind of same thing, right? We don't know if you're going to get a lot of volume out of him, but he usually picks up a couple points. If they score goals, he's probably going to be in the mix. Alex Turcotte, fine value option, I think, at 3K. Certainly not the highest floor or ceiling for that matter, but at 3K with limited value on this slate, I don't mind getting him. They've got by far, outside of Boston one, and honestly, I would say that LA1 probably has what I would classify as the number one matchup overall. I don't necessarily buy full into the Rangers' horrific metrics. The other thing here is this is like a raw matchup. Like this is going to be almost the majority of the night. It's going to be a hard matchup against Montreal too. They are going to see a ton of them, and they should just absolutely decimate them. So LA1 is a line that I really want to take a stance on tonight. I think they're in a terrific spot. You can mix them in very easily along, with LA2, and then I'll probably come in under the field on LA3. But this looks like a great spot. I feel like, it's hard to pinpoint exactly who's going to score from the Kings. We talk about it all the time. So it's hard for me to really mix in all three lines. I feel like you're really stretching yourself thin. I want to plant my flag on one or two of them and hope I get them right. And tonight, that's going to be the top two lines and maybe fade a little bit of this third line chalk. What are you thinking tonight?
Boy, Brock, I'm riding with you here tonight on this one. I really like the look of this top line here tonight for the LA Kings, and I like the look of this second line as well. Couple interesting things. Quentin Byfield drawing the second least ownership of anybody in the top nine for the Kings tonight. What's really interesting is that in his career, he has really had quite a bit of success going up against the Montreal Canadiens in 4 games, 2 goals, and 5 points, averaging 10 DraftKings points per game without the bonuses. So he's having a lot of success there. But so too has basically everybody else in this top 6 for the LA Kings. Kevin Fiala, 16 games played, 4 goals, 11 points. Adrian Kempe, 12 games played, 8 goals, 12 points. Anze Kopitar, 25 games, 9 goals, 23 points. Alex Turcotte, a lone apple in his 1 game going up against the Habs. So I've got a lot of interest in this top 6 here specifically. I think I'm going to mix in some of this bottom 6 as well. Philip Danault is drawing a ton of ownership here tonight at 24%. The second highest owned forward here. And I think the issue there is that, there's just not a lot of great cheap centers here tonight on this slate. And I think that's the reason why so many people are kind of going down there. Speaking for myself, I do have Philip Danault in my DFO head-to-head lineup tonight. Kind of a cash build for me here. We'll see that in a little bit. And the reason that I have him in there is just because he's kind of a cheap center, and there's not a lot of other really great options down there at that price point. So I've got a lot of interest in this top 6 for sure. I'll probably be over the field on LA1, probably meet the field around LA2, and then be under on LA3. And I think I feel pretty good about that. This third line, like offensively, they've had some issues this year, right? There's not a ton of shot volume that have been coming as of late from these 3 guys. Warren Fogle, 7.3 shots on goal per hour over his last 20, just 3.7 from Danault. Trevor Moore, like his shot volume is just completely dried up this year versus last year. Just 5 shots on goal per hour over his last 20 games. Although Moore does has a good track record. Moore does have a good track record against the Habs, 5 goals and 6 points in 9 games played. So I think there's some reason to have interest in all 3 of these lines for sure. I can see why the public's getting there. But again, for me, like, when we sit back and look at this slate as a whole in terms of the ownership, like I'm much more comfortable just getting over the field on Edmonton 1, in this spot here tonight, coming in a little bit under on the Rangers top line, and being over the field on LA 1. So that's kind of the way that I'm looking at attacking this one here.
Just to talk about LA3 for a minute, I'm not playing them a lot, but just to give you some context here, Moore's shot volume is bouncing back a hair. He's gone at least over 2 shots in 5 consecutive games. Not saying a lot, but he was, it had dried up entirely. The minutes are bouncing back up a little bit as of late, and 11 shots in his last 5. It's not great, but it's better than what we've seen prior to that. And then Fogle, 2.8 shots per game over his last 10. He's been a little bit better as well. But, you got that revenge narrative here with Phil Danault. Hasn't been much of a revenge narrative for him, though. Has not scored a goal, only has 2 assists in 9 games since leaving the Habs. So, I feel way better about those top 2 lines. Let's just also bring up the trend chart here. Last 10 games at 5v5. The Montreal Canadiens, the worst defensive team on this slate by a wide margin at 5v5, followed by Chicago at number 2. So you take a look here at the Kings, really, really good defensive numbers as of late, really, really good on the PK as well. It's really difficult to get that interested in the Habs tonight. I liked them last night up against the Sharks for obvious reasons. They looked fine. But yeah, this is a really tough matchup for them. They grade out still as the 6th best line to target. Not really seeing a lot of ownership at all. I might take 10% of them tonight just to get over the field because their ownership is so low. This is really the only line capable of doing anything for the Habs right now. Take a look at the underlying metrics. I mean, they're not terrible across the board, but the top line is by far the best. Take a look at the actual goals number. They're the ones doing the damage. They're the ones on the top power play unit. The power play unit, as I mentioned, in a really, really tough spot. So I do not like the Habs, but in like a 20 max, I might get to 10%, get slightly over the field, but that would be kind of where I would cap my ownership. Do not have much interest in this team at all. Are you different?
No, I agree with you. I'm comfortable getting to like 10%. I mean, Montreal 1 is still grading out as the 6th best line to target on this slate as a whole here. Obviously it's going to be a really tough matchup against a solid defensive team, but, they're really generating some offense here as of late. 4.2 goals for per hour, over 2.9 expected. An 81 offensive score. Like that's a pretty solid mark right there, right? That's got to be top few on this slate. So I don't mind getting there whatsoever. Most of my interest is going to be coming in Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki, which the field is agreeing upon. Suzuki coming in 9%, Caulfield 10.5%, and Slafkovsky just down at like 2% ownership, which also feels a little bit weird because it feels like he's been better here as of late. The problem there is you're just not getting a lot of shot volume from him. So
no,
I hope for him to pick up an apple or 2, and at 5K, it's a little bit of a heavy price tag there, considering some of the other options in that price range. I know he's a center, but Anze Kopitar, $5,200 feels like a better play than like Slafkovsky does, for example. I agree with you. I don't really have a whole lot of interest in the rest of this lineup here. Patrick Laine one-offs at $6,300. You could maybe talk me into a little bit of that there. Scoring a goal per hour over his last 20 games, 7.3 shots on goal, 6 goals, 10 points, 15 games against the Habs. Might be a bit of a pay up to get different spot a little bit there if you're looking for a one-off option. But it feels pretty bleak here for the Habs as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. Slafkovsky, 5K. He was $3,900 like 5 games ago. So definitely a price increase. But at 1.9% ownership in a 20 max, I'm willing to take some stands there. And if he scores 1 goal, I mean, it's pretty good leverage. This is certainly not a great matchup for them, but I mean, at 10%, it's not going to kill you if they do kind of what's expected tonight. I like Darcy Kemper a lot tonight too, so I'm not going to get too carried away with the Habs. And then the rest of this team looks bleak. And then the power play, I mean, doesn't get much worse than the 21st power play going up against the number 1 ranked PK overall tonight. Let's get into some goalies and defensemen, and then we will head on our way, get you guys to building some lineups, and hopefully winning some big dough tonight. Sort by value here. Darnell Nurse has just been an absolute volume hound as of late. Yesterday I think he had 4 shots and 2 blocks, left you wanting a little bit more in that double bonus area. I played him a little bit. That was kind of unfortunate. I think he's a fine play again tonight. As much as he plays and as much as he shoots and block shots, he's just out there doing it every night, and basically has like a 9-point floor at this point. And anything else on top of that's gravy, and he's certainly capable of picking up some points tonight in a nice matchup with the Blackhawks. Matthias Ekholm at 4K, plays a lot with that top line. I don't mind getting to him at all. K'Andre Miller is always a guy that I play a decent amount of. You're more of a Braden Schneider. He's $100 cheaper than Miller. I think they're both fine plays. The Kings really have some nice value options tonight. Gavrikov and Doughty are playing a ton, both projected for over 25 minutes. Doughty just stepped right back in the lineup and just munching minutes. Also on that top power play unit. But if you want to pay down a little bit, Joel Edmondson projected for 23 minutes tonight at $2,800. He feels like probably my favorite value play overall. If you're talking about just getting really, really cheap, I love getting down to Edmondson, but Schneider's right there as well. Lane Hutchins still just $4,100 if you do end up stacking some Habs. Nikita Zadorov, probably my second favorite, like 3K defenseman tonight, along with Edmondson if you're kind of getting way down there. Alex Carrier, capable of blocking a shitload of shots. Nice matchup for him. The Kings should dominate puck possession in this one. It presents a lot of opportunities for these Habs defensemen like Carey, like David Savard to block shots. Similar to the Blackhawks, obviously, against the Oilers tonight. Guys like Connor Murphy, guys like Alec Martinez, plenty of shot block volume tonight. If you plan on playing John Klingberg, there is a chance that he's a healthy scratch tonight. I included him in the charts because he was in there last night, but it sounds like Troy Stetcher might come in for him on the second half of a back-to-back. Anybody I didn't talk about, Zach, that you're interested in tonight?
I think you covered a lot of the guys that got my interest.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. You do a great job of nailing the defenseman here. Like, we got pretty similar thoughts on how we view defensemen. I think Evan Bouchard for me is probably my favorite defensive play on the slate here. Coming in as the most expensive defenseman at $6,600. His last 3 games have been absolutely
insane.
Tremendous, averaging like 23.5 DraftKings points per game, 23.3 point game, 29-point game, 17-point game at $6,600 in a real good spot for the Edmonton Oilers tonight. He's playing almost all of his minutes at 5-on-5 with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And he also plays on the top power play unit with those guys. So he's basically attached to the hip with those 2 guys. So I've got a lot of interest in Bouchard. What is he projecting for 14% ownership? I'll probably be like double the field on him easy tonight. But you mentioned Nurse and Ekholm grading out really well from value projections. One guy a little cheaper from the Oilers blue line that I like, Brett Kulak, $3,300. This guy's very productive in his ice time, averaging about 20 minutes per game, 4.5 shots on goal per hour, 4.8 blocks per hour, 1 point per hour over his last 20 games. Just very productive guy when he's out there on the ice. David Savard at 3K, I've got some interest there. 8.7 blocked shots per hour over his last 20 games. That's the highest of any defenseman on the slate here tonight, projecting for just 1.5% ownership. The Kings are a volume shooting team. He's a guy who should have a good shot at getting the block bonus here on this slate tonight.
I echo that sentiment about Evan Bouchard. I mean, 14% is a lot lower than I anticipated. This is a guy that's routinely like $7,200, $7,300. Now down to $6,600. Really good spot for him tonight. There's plenty of value elsewhere to make up for that salary at $6,600. It's a really nice price tag, and I agree wholeheartedly. I don't mind getting to plenty of McDavid, Leon, Bouchard stacks tonight and just trying to find the correct value elsewhere. Let's get to the goalies, and then we'll head on our way. We still got the daily face-off, the head-to-head lineup challenge, and the hat-trick pick challenge coming up. I don't know if the chat's broken. I mean, this is the first episode in our show in forever. We have 1,200 live viewers, not a single comment. Oh, no, Beebs just tested it, and it's working. I guess nobody wanted to talk to us today. That's fine. Normally, it's buzzing. I was like, look, something's broken right now, but it works. So anyways, whatever. If you have any questions at the end of the show, we'll try to get to them really quickly. But Darcy Kemper grades out as the number 1 goalie overall. Igor Shesterkin, number 2. Oh, Angelo says, yo.
Hey, there we go.
Hey, how's it going? It does work. I'm like, normally there's comments in here before we even get here. So when there was nothing, I'm like, something's broken. We're here. Okay. Everyone's here. That's fine. It's just, we're good.
Feels like we were talking to nobody there for a while.
At least I've been watching the numbers. 1,200 live viewers across YouTube and X as of late. So we're still doing okay. People are here. They just don't want to talk to us. That's fine. I get it.
Okay.
It's a Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Yeah. Darcy Kemper, Igor Shesterkin at the top. Calvin Pickard, number 3. Pickard projected for the lowest ownership of the night, also projected for the lowest shot volume of the night. So that kind of makes sense. Soderblom at 7K is going to be maybe your chalk buster tonight. Really, the chalkbuster kind of feels like Jakub Dobiš tonight, right? Super high ownership coming in on the LA Kings side of things tonight. And I think that Dobiš is interesting. We've seen him play tremendously well at $7,200. I'll probably have a little bit more Dobiš than I do Soderblom. I think I feel a little bit better about the Habs chances than I do the Blackhawks chances. And I don't mind mixing Korpisalo in either. I probably won't get to a ton of Korpisalo. I think Dobiš is probably my favorite cheap option. And then Kemper, Shesterkin towards the top. And if you want to lock up a win, I think Pickard's fine. The chat's buzzing now. Thoughts on onslaught stacks tonight? Zach, you already answered this, but yeah, I love onslaught stacks pretty much any night, but on small slates, they're my favorite. I just love jamming in like an onslaught stack and just hoping that, especially like in a spot you feel good about, whether it's the Kings, whether it's the Oilers, maybe it's the Rangers or the Bruins tonight, like those onslaught stacks feel great. And if they go off, it's a good way to get different, especially on a 3-game slate. Like if there's 2 randomly low scoring games and you onslaughted the right team, it's an automatic ticket to the top. So everyone was busy liking the video to comment. That makes sense. I agree. And if you haven't already, make sure you smash the like button. Zach, who do you like between the pipes tonight?
Nobody.
Yeah, that's fair.
It feels like a bit of a tough slate for goaltenders here. I mean, you got Korpisalo likely to start there or projected at least for now. He doesn't feel like a great option here tonight. Jakub Dobiš, he feels like okay at $7,200. 7 games played, he's got 5 wins so far, 927 save percentage. But it's also a pretty tough matchup for them here tonight on the second half of a back-to-back. Kings look like they're in a great spot. Darcy Kemper, I guess he might be my favorite play of the night at $8,200. But the public feels that way as well, projecting for like 25% ownership. I think I've got a little bit more interest in Korpisalo than the field does at 11%. Obviously, it's been a tough year for him. 894 save percentage, 0.5 goals saved above expected this year. But I do, like I mentioned earlier, I do kind of like Boston outright in the betting markets tonight. So not really a great slate. And the truth of the matter is that like all the goaltenders here have not been great against the opposing teams that they've played. Specifically, a guy in Igor Shesterkin. I mean, 12 games played against the Bruins in his career. He's only got 4 wins against them. That's a little bit of a surprising number to me, to say the least here. So I don't know. It's just going to depend on the lineups that I'm building, and whoever kind of fits into those lineups is who's going to get the start for me in the crease tonight.
Yeah, I think that Dobiš is super interesting. Just like the Kings offense, as much as we like them in this spot, has been pretty dormant as of late. In their last 13 games, they've scored just 1.8 goals per game. Now, about 10 of those, exactly 10 of those 13 games have come on the road. So, keep that in mind. But even still, the 3 home games during that stretch, just 5 goals. So this is an offense that has been sputtering. And I think Dobiš could be a bit of a chalk buster tonight. And as we mentioned, he's played great. Like it wouldn't totally stun me if the Habs pull out like a 2-1 win here in just an absolutely gross game. So I don't mind getting to him as kind of my cheapie tonight. I agree with you, though. I don't hate Korpisalo either. Let's get to today's hat trick pick challenge. If you want to participate in today's hat trick pick challenge, drop your hat trick pick in the comment section of the video on YouTube, not the live chat that's now buzzing. The actual comment section, wait till the end of the show. If your player scores a hat trick, which Willie Nylander did last night, nobody picked him, though, we'll get you a $25 gift card to nationgear.ca. I think what we're going to start doing moving forward, perhaps, is if there's a hat trick pick or a hat trick that nobody picked, we'll just raffle it off to anybody that at least submitted a hat trick pick. Seems fair, right? I mean, nobody wants to miss out on hat trick, so we'll try doing that moving forward. If anybody scores a hat trick and wasn't picked, any of the comments, we'll raffle one off and try to get hand some extra hat trick picks out, because hat tricks are few and far between. We don't want to miss out on them. So we'll start with that today moving forward. My hat trick pick for tonight, since I won our last head-to-head, is going to be give me Leon Draisaitl.
Bastard.
It's a tough one.
Fine, I'll go with Connor McDavid then.
Shucks. Tough one. Let's get to today's daily face-off, our head-to-head. Lineup challenge. I've won the last 2 to claw back to 500 on the season, 32 and 32 now. It's been a tight race this season. As we go on, we really didn't come up with a good enough prize for whoever wins this because we've come up with 0 prizes, and it's been so tight. We might have to change up, add a little bit of a bet here moving forward. But I went with Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Corey Perry, and then I went with that mini stack of New York 2. I think they're in a reasonable spot here against Boston. It's probably not the best cash game play ever, but I didn't care. And I paired them with Braden Schneider. And then I got Joel Edmondson and Alex Laferriere from the LA Kings tonight. I went with Igor Shesterkin between the pipes, which I did because I didn't think you were going to. You fall in love with the 100% matchup score, so I thought for sure there's going to be more Boston in this lineup, and that's why I played Igor. I was wrong.
Yeah, well, it's actually funny you mentioned that because I originally, I was going with kind of the cash game build here, and I had David Pasternak in for Leon Draisaitl at first and Darcy Kemper in the crease. And then I kind of decided, you know what? I don't think I have enough Edmonton Oilers in here. If Zach loses, he has to get better Wi-Fi.
Bet's
God
on.
Damn it, Ryan. That's good.
The bet is really
on. Good. So for me, I that was kind of where I landed with this lineup here as I kind of looked at it and I said, man, I've got McDavid and Ekholm, but that's not enough Edmonton Oilers for my lineup. So I had to get Leon in there. So that's kind of the way that I went with this cash game mindset. Obviously, McDavid and Draisaitl grading out extremely well here tonight. Matthias Ekholm looks like a good value play at 4K. Joel Edmondson on the blue line, $2,800 pop in there. Wanted to get Adrian Kempe in there for a little LA1 exposure. Alex Laferriere for some LA2 exposure. Eat some of the chalk there. And then Philip Deneau just kind of fit in there at $3,800. Ryan Donato looks like he's in a good little value spot here as well, $3,400.
That is going to do it for today's edition of the DFO DFS report. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, we got a much bigger slate. I think we got 9 game slate tomorrow, so that'll be a fun one. Please smash that like button if you can. If you're watching on YouTube, it really helps us grow this channel, helps us keep this show free and all this content free. And yeah, smash that like button. Really appreciate it. Hopefully you return tomorrow with more money in your bankroll tomorrow than you had tonight. And shout out to our friends at rotogrinders.com for providing projected ownership for today's show. Really levels up the show for us and makes it a little bit easier for us to break down. So appreciate them so much. And if you want to get $20 off your first month of NHL Premium at rotogrinders.com, you can do so by clicking the link in the description of the video on YouTube. Also, there is the link to our DFO DFS Discord if you want to join the Discord family. We run a DraftKings contest every single night, which Nick really tries to push everybody to join. So keep doing that. Zach creates it. Nick is our advertiser. Thank you, Nick. And then we also just drop all the late breaking news so that you don't miss a thing. You don't have any holes in your lineup. So join the Discord as well. Smash the like button. Go to Roto Grinders, sign up for them, $20 off, and win some money tonight. We had a couple messages yesterday. Some big money winners last night for us as well. Somebody paired Toronto 2 and Utah 2 together on our recommendation. So that worked out really well. I messaged you that I was pissed off that I somehow didn't get there because I had lots of Toronto 2 and lots of Utah 2, but never together. It made no sense. But anyways, best of luck tonight. See you back here tomorrow. Cheers.